Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another ASP.NET Dynamic Data How-To screencast. In this short screencast, we'll talk about how to add business logic validation to your dynamic data sites just by putting it in the model and then seeing that validation being presented on the UI, and we'll talk about how that gets bridged. So if we take a look at our dynamic data site, we're using the Northwind database that I always end up using, and we've got our products model. We saw in our previous screencast how we added things like ranges and UI hints to the model and how that presented itself to the UI. We also saw how we plugged metadata in. In this instance, we have a partial class product where that metadata exists in another class called product metadata. Let's go look at the product, the other side of the partial class. Part of it is here in product, and the rest of it is over in this generated code. We don't want to edit our generated code because it might be generated again. But we need extensibility for this class. We need to be able to change it. That's why it's partial. Additionally, there's a section here called Extensibility Method Definitions. It's actually set up as a region, so if I hover over it, I see what's inside there. We've got a number of methods available to us, and these are partial methods. They're partial in that part of them are here and part of them are elsewhere. And partial methods are an interesting take on extensibility. Certainly, this could have been called product base, and we might have had virtuals, and you could then derive and override. But instead, partial methods give you kind of the best of all worlds. Let's see how this would work. We've got partial methods for all of the different columns. We've got changed and changing, so kind of before and after changing. Here the product ID changes, and then the product ID is changed. We've also got onloaded and onCreated as well as an onValidate. Let's think about setting up some validation for onProduct name changing. Let's go back over to the products class, and we'll just start typing partial, and I get a list of the partial methods that I can implement. Let's take onProduct name changing. So let's say if the value does not start with Acme, so if it is the case that the new value does not start with the word Acme, as in Acme tea or Acme soda, then we will throw a new validation exception. Let's hover over validation and exception, right click and say go to definition. Let's see what that is. That's in system.componentModel.data annotations. This is a validation exception that's more generic. This could potentially be used in other places like in WinForms. So in this case, we're going to just throw validation exception. We're not saying what that will end up looking like, just that it is a problem. Let's go ahead and hit save. We'll hit F5. And run our site. So now let's click on our product page. Let's edit a product. I'll make a change to this product's name, but notice that it does not say Acme. That's not the beginning of the product name. Let's put a breakpoint here. We'll hit update. Now we're sitting in on product name changing right now. We can see the new value of our product. We can look at our call stack. We can see that we got called in a setter because of the update of the links data source view. We're in the setter, and because we had a partial class, on product name changing was called. So we'll go ahead and continue, let that exception throw, and we get a list of validation errors. So dynamic data is automatically taking our validation error and turning it into something that the user can see. We could have pulled that text out of an internationalized regex. So you can use this technique in all of your models, make your logic as complicated as you like. There's also a more generic onValidate. And within onValidate, with LINQ to SQL, you'll be able to look at your change action and say things like if action equals insert, update, or delete. So you could have different validation based on whether your objects were being updated versus inserted. Throw a validation exception, and dynamic data will present it to the user as an ASP.NET validation error. Thanks a lot. We'll see you again next video.